G'day folks, and welcome to another episode of UFOA Australia. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mary Rodwell. Born in the United Kingdom, Mary has been a registered nurse, a midwife and a health educator. In 1991 she migrated to Perth, Western Australia. In the year 2000, Mary became a consultant and a researcher for the UFO exhibition known as Phenomena, which was held in Fremantle. Also in 2000, she was the producer of an EB award-winning documentary, Expressions of ET Contact, a visual blueprint. In 2002, Mary released her fascinating book, Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. In 2003, she was an organiser for the international conference Hidden Truths, held in Perth. Also in 2003, she wrote an article which appeared in the prestigious medical journal Australian Doctor Focus magazine. Since 1994, Mary has worked in private practice as a professional counsellor, hypnotherapist, metaphysical teacher, researcher and author, international speaker, and a producer and director of 2 documentaries. Also in 2004, Mary was the producer of an EBE award-winning documentary, Expressions of ET Contact, a communication and healing blueprint. Mary has now moved to Agnes Waters in Queensland, where she continues her lifelong work. Mary is now the founder and the principal of the Australian Close Encounters Research Network, commonly known as ACERN. She is also the official representative of the Star Kids Project Australia and the Vice Principal of Star Kids Project USA. In 2010, in November, Mary featured in the SBS documentary My Mother Talks to Aliens. The show obtained outstanding success also on the Sci-Fi Network in the USA. Mary is an international speaker around the world and has spoken to countless thousands of people. UFOA Australia would like to welcome Mary Rodwell. Hello, Mary.
Hello.
How are you today?
Thank you for inviting me, Andrew.
That's okay. That's okay. And we've had quite a fair, busy few days, I believe.
Well, we certainly have, and it's been wonderful to be here in Melbourne and have a chance to connect with the groups here.
Yep.
And you particularly, because you've been so active in really getting things moving in Melbourne again, which I think is wonderful. And so it was nice to help and participate in bringing people together again.
Yeah. Well, I guess we do what we can do. That's all all it comes down to, I suppose. I mean, everybody chips in and does what they can do. We had the meeting last night. That was a fairly good meeting.
I thought it was wonderful. There were a lot of very receptive people, and I was able to present a broad range of my research, which allowed people, I think, from all levels of awareness to get something from it. I certainly hope so. But it was a wonderful energy, and I think it went extremely well. So that was my feeling anyway from the evening.
Yep. Mary actually spoke for just on 3 hours, so it was a fairly intense night. But I think everybody walked away from there a lot more knowledgeable than what they had been before. Just let's digress a little bit to how you first got involved with the paranormal, UFOs and the like. Where did it all start for you?
Well, really, when I was in private practice, although I've always been interested in the strange, weird and wonderful, I had a mother who was very interested in all the mysteries, as we call them, of life. So I suppose I've grown up with a curiosity anyway. Although I'd been aware of a lot of more paranormal experiences from some of my clients who have lost someone in grief and bereavement. Often people have really unusual experiences where they feel or sense their mother or father around that's moved on, and I had no problem accepting that as a tangible reality in terms of their experience. I'd never met anyone who'd had any encounters. For example, I was very lucky at the time that a few months earlier I'd read a couple of books about that. One was Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist, who had written the book Abduction. I happened to pick it up and, this looks interesting, synchronously. And I'd read Communion, of course, with Whitley Strieber's own accounts. Read it because it looked interesting, no other reason. And within a couple of months of that, the first my first client with these experiences came in and said, look, I've heard you're open-minded. I'm having these experiences, there's no support groups for this, people just think you're a loony, and proceeded to tell me about his own encounters where he'd wake up in the morning with shaved areas on his leg and marks, and his whole family were aware of things going on, and he said they're terrified. And the Rellies won't come to the house because they think it's haunted and they think it's demons. He says, I know it's not demons, he says, but I don't know where to go. And fortunately, because I'd read a little bit about this, I knew that there was a very real possibility that this was, a credible case. And from that, I started to look into it more. I even took it to advanced counselling, which I was doing. They actually told me about their strange experiences rather than telling me the guy was crazy, which was fascinating. And really, from that, the rest was history. The more I researched, the more I could see that it was valid and this was real, and that certainly far bigger than I ever believed in terms of numbers.
So I guess at that point in time there was no real support groups for that sort of connection.
Not for that. I was actually attending and became part of the ASPR, the Australasian Society for Psychical Research, in Perth itself. There were meetings held at Murdoch University by Professor Frodsham, who was very interested in all of that, which was good to connect with people like that. But I hadn't still heard very much about those who'd had encounters. But luckily, by being connected to that organisation, I met a social worker who was very aware that when she thought she was going crazy, and it was when she was in her lounge room one day, she saw these three strange beings, thought, well, I've lost the plot now. Somebody knocked on the door, and when she opened it, they walked in, and they said, do you realise you've got three strange beings in your lounge room? She said, you can see them as well?
Wow.
And it was like, well, if you can see them as well, maybe I'm not crazy after all. But as a social worker, knowing how it would be perceived by her colleagues, but from that she started to open up to her own encounters as well, and the fact it was affecting her daughter. And we teamed up initially, and we had the first abduction support group, as we called it then, which actually brought 12 people in the very first time.
It's like opening up a Pandora's box.
Absolutely. 12 people, which we thought was really rare, and all of a sudden 12 people turn up. And from that it just, snowballed. And I did interviews here and there, the odd little bit in the paper, the local community radio, and it just kept going and kept going. And although she decided to go more into the healing field and whatever, I was there's counsellors everywhere doing all sorts of things, but here is a niche where there didn't seem to be anyone prepared to go there, and I'm just one of those people that it looked really fascinating. It was telling me more about our reality, it was telling us more about our world. And for me, I'm just nosy, and I wanted to know more.
I wouldn't say nosy, but anyway.
Curious and nosy.
Maybe curious, yeah, that's a good way.
A bit of everything, I just, we're all trying to understand what life's about. Where is it going? Who are we?
This was all happening in Perth, Western Australia.
That's right.
Which, as you and I both know, I've lived in Perth as well. The number of people, say, back in the 90s in Perth was a lot less than what it is, say, in Victoria or Australia. Sydney. And so therefore you're getting all these people coming in there, so you've got to be thinking to yourself, well, how many more people are there around the world, or even in Australia or across this side of the world?
That's absolutely right, Andrew. And the thing is, you realise it is the tip of the iceberg. The more that I went out and talked about it, conscious living, all these different, spiritual groups where I'd find the spiritualists would say, one of my guides is blue and doesn't look human or whatever, I realised how much it actually is part of the psyche of a human consciousness. Still not really quite sure about the numbers until more when you do these things like Today Tonight and all these other things, because this is this alien lady talking about all these weird things. It's the numbers of people that were contacting me was just mind-blowing.
So kind of because you've got that many people, then you probably starting to think, well, how can we build some sort of a network to have not just yourself helping these people out, but maybe other people as well?
Absolutely. And although there are a number of groups around Australia that, unfortunately, a lot of the time it was more focused on sightings, which is an important one, and certainly in terms of validating people's experiences. And the nuts and bolts, as I call it, of ufology is about showing the scientific research that is qualifying and verifying this reality.
Yep.
A lot of them were not in a position to offer emotional and psychological support because they're not therapists, they're not hypnotherapists, or whatever. Understandably, they were a bit wary. Oh my goodness, now this is a bit real when people are actually saying they're interacting with those bright lights in the sky.
Yeah.
And that's the next step that was very difficult for many groups, I think primarily because many of them are amateurs. They're doing this out of a heart place where they're not spending full time, they haven't got the resources for another side of that. So I fully understood all of that. But what it did mean was people were feeling very bereft when they'd go to one of these groups and not always get the support they were looking for. And often it was because they didn't know, the groups didn't know how to support them anyway. Because this is really, this is really in your face, particularly if they're traumatized and they're not qualified counsellors. So then it was trying to resource people that were open enough to offering resources, and that's much harder to find. So, I would do my best to encourage at least, in the groups, a certain amount of buddy support, because that was very useful. Because if you've had experiences and if you're not in too bad a place, you may be able to at least listen to other people that have experiences as well. And that way, it was amazing how they could help one another through some of the more difficult sides to this.
So does Australia have a good buddy support now?
Not as much as I would like, but it's certainly increasing, because I found over the years a lot more now, a lot more people are coming out with their experiences. I mean, being part of documentaries like My Mum Talks to Aliens, although I hated the title of it, it certainly got people watching it. And what I found is that by, SBS has released that 4 times nationally now. It's even been on Qantas international and domestic flights. So I'm getting people that have seen it on the flights or seen it, in the other showings, and it always generates several hundred emails, phone calls of people saying, thank God there's someone I never
There's
knew.
a lifeline out there.
Yeah, because it's not something I can afford to do, is publicise what I do. It's only through public talks, or I've talked at libraries and a lot of those kinds of venues, as well. But anywhere when I have to do an interview, and universities have done little bits, I've been in university magazines and whatever. It's amazing the numbers of people that eventually access me, and we're talking about a broad range of people. I mean, some of my clients have been psychiatrists, psychologists, from nurses, doctors, policemen, pilots, journalists.
I think that's the important thing to note here, is that it shows no bounds. It doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter who you are or what you do, it could affect anybody.
This is the whole point. A lot of people think that it's something people want to own up to. And I'm saying, look, a lot of the people that come to me actually are not in the slightest interested in sci-fi. They're not they don't watch Doctor Who like I do. And the bottom line is, they don't, a lot of the time, they've not even thought about, intelligences in space, or, are they visiting us, or anything like that.
It's not part of their world, I guess.
It's not part of their world. And they'll come to me saying, I don't believe in them, but I'm seeing them. So this isn't about a belief. 9 times out of 10, it's about an experience that then gives them the belief. So it's actually the reverse of what people believe, and it's a misconception that they're waiting for some kind of fame and fortune. It is not the fame and fortune that you want, because most of the time you're going to be ridiculed. Who wants to stand up and be ridiculed? Who's going to want that? Nobody wants that.
No.
And this is what I say to the journalists. They're not coming to me, how do you believe them? And I'm saying, hold on a minute. Do you think someone's going to fly hundreds of miles, spend a lot of money to come and tell me a porky pie? Why would they do that? What would be the point of it? I'm not going to give them any money for it.
There's no benefit or anything that they're going to get from
it to them, other than if they go out and talk about it on radio, all they're going to get most of the time is skeptics saying, well, you're literally go and see a psychiatrist.
They're just going to get trodden on.
So it's so when people come to me, I said they're speaking their truth. And this is the problem, that they have is, first of all, are you going to believe me and not think I'm crazy? And that's what they'll get on the end of. I'll get on the end of the phone. I don't really know how to say this. I've heard you help people. Well, what is it? I don't really know where to start. You do know some people have had this, don't you? And this is how they'll start off. It's very careful, because they're really afraid that I might say, well, I'm sorry, I think you're crazy. So, people aren't seeking this. This happens because it's real.
So with the support groups that you've got, have you got them in each state, or is it only specific areas, or?
Well, I've done my best to try and resource people. That's part of the reason that I do go and give presentations in different places.
You've got one here in Melbourne too, though, don't you?
Yes, I've got a buddy support system, which is run by a gentleman, that has come to a good place himself, and it's very important that that someone that connects people is in a better place, when they've got past the fear and trauma and are feeling relatively comfortable with how they are with it.
Maybe we should tell the audience that how would they get in contact if they want to talk to somebody? Who would they go to?
Well, apart from organisations like yourself now that are really keen to start offering a broader range of referrals, if nothing else, get in contact with me, and then I can say where in different places they could find resources and help. Okay,
and then obviously there's a website for that?
Well, yes, my CERN website is www.acern.com.au.
Okay.
But they can also just Google Mary Rodwell and up it will come anyway. It's, with a lot of other interviews and things like that. Yep.
Now we've just been through a regression today with somebody, and I was not here for the regression, but I am here now, and the person is here in the room. He is 100% better than what he was before. So for folks out there who are a little bit scared about all this, all I can say is that try and be a little bit brave and do it, because I believe it is extremely helpful. If you're going through some dramas, things you can't explain, some fears you have that you don't know how to talk to people about, or don't know who to talk to about, then Mary would be the best person to speak to. And certainly if you're in Melbourne, there is a group here that will be able to help you. So even though Mary's in Queensland, we can still make sure that we can get some help for you. So. That's the main thing for people to realise, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are going through like what we had today, no idea where to go to or who to talk to, and now it's opened the door with the key and things are a lot better. So this person's a friend of mine, so I thank you personally on live camera, so thank you very much for your help, because it's made a big difference to his life. So let's move on a little bit. So 1994, I think the EBE movie came out.
No, it was 2002 for the first one.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And 2004 for the second one. Yeah. What I did with those, and it really is about recording people's experiences without the editing. A lot of the time people are afraid, as soon as it's a bit different, that if you add that onto a documentary or whatever, that people are going to struggle and not believe it. But I also know there are many people that are having similar experiences. The first one is really about much of the artwork that those that have encounters seem to manifest, particularly those that are of artistic nature. We know when we have an experience that we'll express it in many ways afterwards, which is evidence of that experience. And so the artwork is sometimes very complex, geometric artwork, for example. But it's not only that. They may start to find themselves doing strange symbols, or they may find themselves articulating a language that isn't their native tongue and have no idea why they want to say this stuff and speak like this. And it comes as easily as it would be their native tongue. They're sometimes confronted by it, but others say, well, it's part of this connection I feel to this what I call my other family, my star family or whatever. And so what I did was put that onto, we did the story of not only the artwork, the many beings that people draw. And it's quite fascinating when you say, well, what were they like? And they will say, well, they've got this, and they will have a lot of detail, which again takes it out of the realm of fantasy, because the more detail is, you must have seen something to see this detail. And what I saw with many of the different types of being, and remember there's, Andrew, there's many different types, even different humanoid types, let alone ones that look like insect-like beings, for example.
Nordics and all those.
The Nordics are more humanoid, the little greys eaters, there's many different kinds of those. The reptilian or lizard-like beings, for example. A whole range, some that are energy, just pure energy, light beings, for example. And what I discovered was what my clients were drawing, I was seeing images of the same ones in other pictures and books and references from researchers around the world. So it was pretty obvious it wasn't specific to just one person. I'm going to draw these ones. These were being seen right across the world, and the different types were being seen across the world.
And some of the people that did these drawings were only children, yeah?
Absolutely, and the reason that I give a lot of veracity to children is that they don't watch talk shows, they don't read books about this, they're talking about their own personal experience. And the interesting thing is, you know, you always get some saying, well, they've got a really vivid imagination. Well, tell me any child that will draw a craft, a triangular craft, and put an energy field around it and tell you it's an energy field. Now, what child of 4 knows of energy fields, for example?
Yep.
And then saying, you know, that they've been inside those ones and describe the beings that they meet in them. Now, that is quite different to what you see on television. And what they're describing is not what they see on television, because those kinds of specifics aren't in a TV program.
Adds a lot of credibility to it.
A child talking about going through walls and learning more on the spaceship than they do at school.
Yep.
Now, what child will talk about going through walls? Where is there any TV program that talks about going through walls? These are the points that I mean.
Okay. So, well, you won an EBE award for that.
What was hilarious for me, because the film festival in the UFO Congress in Nevada is it is the biggest in the world. You get 1,000 to 1,200 people attending, and researchers from all over the world. And the film festival is about researchers doing, and filmmakers making relevant films to do with the whole phenomena, UFO phenomena, from sightings to whatever.
Yep.
I didn't enter because I thought I was going to win anything. That was the hilarious thing. I mean, I'd never done anything like it, and the people that helped me, Bradley Denise is no longer with us now, and David Sandico, who is a musician, and Tracy, who spoke about her experiences, they were just, what we wanted to do was show some of the artwork, because it was so fascinating, the different types of beings, the drawings and what have you. So basically, it was all, you know, literally
was more
little homemade backyard kind of stuff, and put together. And it was an afterthought when I actually asked Tracy to talk about her remembering being on the craft when she was 5 years old, and how she found that she had healing in her hands when she was 15. And saying, and I did these drawings, which when I took to a support group, everybody seemed to know how they were put together, and this kind of thing. And she didn't even know she was going to speak on the film. We just did it as an add-on. She, you know, she just sat there and said, well, what I'm going to say, I'll just say it how it is, you know. And this, so we put this, we did it in less than a month. And David Sandico, who added the music to it, had never done anything like that before. And so we thought, oh, we'll add some music to it. And I said, well, I'll take it along and we'll put it in this film festival. And it was bizarre, because no Hollywood here, really, really primitive, no techniques. We didn't have a clue about techniques. You know, it was you know, lights from Woolies and what have you, doing the lighting and whatever. And lo and behold, we win an award at this film fest. I remember the guy who did sightings. You know, they're really professional. You know. And he came up to me and he says, "I got to hand it to you." He said, "It's how you've done it." He said, "Is so powerful because it's so simple, because there was no Hollywood in it. It was just raw. And yet it had a power to it and an energy, because it wasn't, you know, tidied up and polished and what have you. It was the raw thing." And I mean, I couldn't believe it that I'd won this award from the film festival. And we did another one which also had a success, which was communication and healing, a couple of years later, and we did a very similar thing, and we drew on people that had found they had healing abilities, that came out with the language, and we showed snippets of people from various parts of the world. And again, you know, it had this raw power, because, you know, I mean, none of us have been trained in anything. And me, all I did was, you know, do my usual, you know, bit of an interview and let them get on with it. But isn't it amazing, like we're doing now, sometimes that's all that's needed, is because it has a naturalness that I think appeals to people. And I think that really is what was going on there.
And it's probably got a sense of reality to it,
it's
for
real.
a lot of people, because
people
they've
are not
experienced
pretending.
it.
That's exactly right. People are being themselves. And it is challenging, but what I've known is when I've shown snippets of these films in my presentations, how many people get triggered by just seeing that and thinking, oh my God, it isn't just me. Thank thank heaven it's not just me.
Yeah.
And that's what it's for. It's to say to people, you're okay. You're not going crazy, because there's others experiencing exactly the same thing as you.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so after leaving Perth, now you're living in Queensland. That must have been a big change for you.
It was, because I've got all my networks in Perth and some really good friends in the media, as well as those that helped me with, when we had speakers come and talks and what have you. But I needed to go to Queensland because I'm a grandma, and my daughter went there, and I wasn't going to miss my grandkids growing up. So it was as simple as that, really. And I thought, well, I've got a computer. I can still operate from this tiny little place. Agnes Water is only a tiny little place. But what's lovely, it's a lovely energy. There are a lot of sightings there. And I'm getting to know the community, and they're getting to know there's a weird and wonderful alien lady that lives there. And the bottom line is that people still come to see me. And they may come and have a holiday there rather than just come for a few hours. They'll come and stay for a few days and enjoy the energy of the place, and we'll do the sessions we need, and they leave.
So 2012, obviously, for a lot of people, 2012 is a big year. A lot of people say it's, with the Mayan calendar, we're coming up to the end. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but what's in store for you for the next 12 months?
Well, it was really quite interesting. I just had a feeling not to put too much on my agenda this year. I'd just written a fourth forward for a book, so I'm actually getting back to my books now, and there's two. One is about the children, the other one is about the bigger picture in terms of people's understanding of their experiences, and it goes into a lot more depth. Those are still both ticking over, but I'm also trying to put together something in a documentary nature of the children describing their experiences in their words, rather than me speaking on behalf of them, because the children, just like anyone, you have the person actually speaking for themselves has an added power rather than second hand. Because the parents, there are many parents out there are being bewildered by what their children are doing. And some of the cases that I'm working with, one is in Northern Europe, where I work through an interpreter, and I talk to the mother, but also the 9-year-old that is telling me, who speaks 3-star languages, that is telling me she's coming to help her family awaken and can help heal the water, and she's here to help one of these new star kids. So, the mother said, what was I supposed to do with this? There's my daughter telling me all this stuff. Where do I go? Who do I talk to?
Very stressful for the parents.
And the same thing with a lady that's not too far away, who's got an 8-year-old boy who she saw was drawing all these strange beings, and realizing that not only did she have experiences as a child, her son was having it as well. And when she finally said, look, what's going on with you? Because I know I had things like this happen. He said to her, you mean I'm not crazy? And it was a big revelation to him.
That's the first thing most people think, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going crazy.
I'm going crazy. And he's 8. And I remember asking him the same thing. What do you fear the most? And he said, I fear that I've been afraid I was going crazy. And this is really, when you've got an 8-year-old telling you they're afraid they're going crazy, something's really wrong with our society. That is making our children think there's something wrong with them just because they're having a more extraordinary or more expanded human experience. And the truth is that lots of children are intuitive and aware enough to see things like energy fields, as he does. He sees energy fields around animals, around people, around plants, and he describes them. He talks about going up on the spaceship with a couple of schoolmates, and the fact that he learns things on the craft where he uses his mind to learn complex mathematics. His mother said he knows all about black holes. He knows all about the physics of where we're going to in the universe. Where does he get it from? He's not reading it in books. And for her, it's been, in a way, she said, I said to her, how do you feel now that you know that your son is having these experiences? She says, to be quite honest, I was bloody angry. She said, how dare you be taking my kid? And this little boy who's 8 piped up and said, but I don't mind, Mum. And she said, I know you don't mind. She said, but I mind.
But I mind.
But that's what he said. I don't mind, Mum, And so there's all this dynamics going on, and it's a whole new reality that they're experiencing on top of the normal. And I said to him, what about the little boys that are having the experience with you on the craft? Have you asked them if they remember? He said, well, I wanted to, but Mum told me not to. And she said, well, it was only because I was trying to protect you, because I didn't want you to be too different.
She was being a mum.
So, here you go. This is exactly how it affects families. Yeah. It's very real and it's very tangible.
So, with the documentary you're putting together, when will that be out?
I don't know. I've got another family up in northern Queensland that I'm going to tap into as well. I had a beautiful young lady here that has a lot older, but has amazing contacts with a number of races that are visiting her, and she's done the drawings of them and she's talked about them, and that will be included as well, because she's coming from the late teens angle, but I'm also, as I say, looking at the younger ages as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put a compilation of all of that, and hopefully then this will give parents some idea of how their children and older children articulate their experiences.
That sounds like a really good idea. Or probably get out to a lot of people that have no idea what's going on.
Yes.
They'll see that, and then they'll have a much better understanding of where they've got to go from there. Okay, so what else is there? So we've got 2 books on the go. We've got a documentary being done. You're a very busy lady, so I don't suppose you've looked beyond those 3 things at this point in time as what you're going to be doing. Any trips?
Well, this year for some reason I didn't feel inclined to be involved in going overseas.
Okay.
I had a feeling that I needed to look more domestically in terms
of more local trips.
Yes, more local trips. I have thought possibly of going to Darwin, because nothing seems to happen up there yet. I know they get lots of sightings.
Yep.
And sometimes it's really good for someone outside to come in and try and pull people together a little bit, because it encourages a lot more networking and what have you. And sometimes it just takes that.
Yep.
Somebody to come in. So I have thought of Darwin.
Okay.
I may be going up north again in other ways and whatever, but I'm waiting to see what unfolds this year, because I think there's going to be a lot of things happen. The consensus is from those that are very tuned in that there may be a lot of interesting and earth changes potentially, but also a lot of shifts in terms of how we are looking at ourselves and where we're going.
Their self-awareness and the consciousness of us.
Absolutely. So it's
and I think
like
you see a lot of that at the moment with some of these groups that are getting around, like Occupy and so forth. There's a lot of that coming to the fore now, and I must say, from a personal point of view, I've had this conversation a few times with a lot of different people. There's like a sense, it's like I can't put my finger on it. There's like something coming, and I don't know how to explain it, but it's like there's something coming our way that's going to change a lot of things about the way we look at life. It might sound a little crazy, but that's the way it feels. It feels like there's a huge change coming, whether it's a more conscious awareness of each other and how we treat each other. I get the feeling it might be that, but I tend to think that this year is the turnaround year, and maybe something might come along that way, and you've sort of said the same thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Well, I feel like in a way it's unknowable. Everybody's got a little bit of a sense in some ways what they need to do or why, and I think they're just listening to their intuition. But the overwhelming, almost like a revealing, there's a sense of revealing, as we're seeing right across the board anyway. Those that have been corrupt, all of that's coming out now, all the secrets, all those kinds of things. And certainly I've been told that something revealing in terms of who we are and where we come from. There's a sense that maybe we're going to be shown more of that.
Well, let me ask you another question, and that's something that's been talked about by a lot of different people, and that's disclosure.
Yes.
Well, what's your feelings and thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's already started. I think there's no doubt with the different countries that have released their UFO files, from the UK right through to New Zealand and Brazil and Mexico, for example, have they've openly said, yes, we've had these unidentified craft, etc., etc., etc. I think a lot of people are waiting for the prime countries, such as the US, for example, is one of those that they're waiting to perhaps disclose. I don't know whether it's going to be them. It may very well be China, because China is very aware and very interested and very open.
Well, they're the powerhouse now, aren't they?
They're the powerhouse now. So it may come from there, but there's been drip feeding. I mean, we know that astronauts like Bud Aldrin and Gordon Cooper and many others are now admitting what they saw when they went up. even to what happened on the moon, for example.
And Edgar Mitchell's just come out recently.
Yeah, and saying the same thing. So it's almost like they can get away with it now, whereas a few years ago they wouldn't have been able to get away with it. I still find it incredible that we don't get that in the world news, that you know, the astronauts saying, you know, and that NASA's been covering up. We know NASA's been covering up.
I've pretty much given up on any kind of news in mainstream
I
media, to be honest.
I still find that quite incredible. They'll talk about the latest celebrity and it's having a baby, and they won't say the most important thing of all is that we're not alone. You know, that to me is incomprehensible, other than the fact that I do know about the cover-up. But I do think there's been a lot of leaking now of more of the tangible cover-up side of it.
Let me talk about something a little closer to home, because you kind of move in the circles with the top echelon around Australia and the ufology world. With the Australian government, what's their involvement? Is there any hidden secrets there that they're not telling us about? Like, say for instance, Pine Gap. What's their involvement there, and what do you know or heard on the grapevine about that?
Well, I think most of us as researchers anyway, and I'm sure you're aware of that too, Andrew, is there's no doubt, we know it's Pine Gap's virtually owned by the Americans. And there are, you know, the things that are seen around there, and there are a lot of those in Alice Springs and around that see strange stuff happening around Pine Gap. And one of the ones that is most interesting for me is Bob Dean, you know, retired Sergeant Major Bob Dean was part of the US Army. He was at SHAPE, in the 60s, where he came across Cosmic Top Secret, where they showed, you know, the 52 races of non-human intelligences that were visiting the planet. Since, I mean, for a long time he was under, you know, the Official Secrets Act. But as time went on, he got more and more impatient with the fact that, you know, people were not being told the truth. And in recent years, it seems he's almost been given carte blanche to say more and more of what he knows. And he talks about Pine Gap. And what he's saying is there is even technology. Now, this is going into sci-fi, but this goes into the reverse engineered side of the technology they've got from crashed craft and what's been given to them as a trade from certain of these intelligences, where we've got technology that can transport us, if you like, from one country to another almost instantly. And Pine Gap has that facility. He says you can literally almost walk through one door in America and be into Pine Gap.
It's like a wormhole sort of thing.
Well, I don't know what they call it. You know, there's many different names for this technology, but they have that. But he says, you know, there are many levels to that, and it goes with Area 51, you know, Dulce, all these secret bases. I suspect there's one in the Blue Mountains. I'm almost certain there's something going on in the Blue Mountains.
Well, there's been a lot of sightings in the Blue Mountains.
That's exactly right, and I've known groups that have gone there where certain things have happened and had missing time, where they've been taken somewhere. I'm pretty certain that the Dandenongs is possibly another one, because there's a lot happen around there. I mean, around Melbourne. There's been I've had a lot of people contact me from Melbourne that have had interactions or had encounters of some kind.
If we go back to, say, the situation with Fred Valentich, you know, Bass Strait is Australia's triangle, you know, Bermuda Triangle. So we've been doing that case for quite a long time now. We're coming towards the end of it, and the next episode that we bring out will have that in it. So that's a very interesting situation where Fred went missing that particular day, and there was a lot of sightings seen on the day with lights and things.
That's
and
right.
We've interviewed a few people who've seen those lights. So Melbourne's very much had a lot of sightings, as you said. There's been a lot like that, and unfortunately there's not been any real place for people to go to report that, other than AUFORN, who do an excellent job. So George Simpson does a great job down here, but you know, one guy, it's very hard. We're talking where we used to have the VUFOA group. They're pretty much gone now. The people that used to run it are no longer around, and we haven't heard anything from them, and their website hasn't been updated in years. So we assume now that they're gone. So I guess with our group, we're trying to kind of replace that to some extent. So hopefully we'll be able to, you know, bring more information out that's what's been there before, because people haven't had anywhere to go for that.
Absolutely, and I think given the fact that you had a documentary recently, as you well know, the Westall 66
Yep.
incident, where was it 200 children or something
200
that
children,
were saw the spacecraft, and
Yep.
some of them were very traumatized, which suggests more happened than a little. And I have spoken to the producers of that and saying, that I suspect that there was probably more going on there as well. I mean, it's an amazing case, and absolutely amazing. So there's a lot happening here for sure. And I think the fact that now there's a little bit more activity in terms of support,
Yep.
I think is going to be really appreciated.
Yeah,
So
well, we'll
that's
certainly be working with you in any way we can, as we will with any other UFO group that's out there that wants to get in contact with us. Anyway, thank you very much for today. Much
welcome.
appreciated. It's been quite a hectic couple of days, but we've managed to get there, and we've had some great successes. So thank you very much for being on the show.
And it's been a pleasure.
No
Thank you
problem.
for that.
Thank you. And goodbye, everybody. See you next time.